Alrighty, so we're jumping straight into the Formula St. George 2-hour down here at Phillip Island. We are currently lined up starting from P4 in the race. You can see we're standing second on the grid here. The reason for that is ahead of this Le Mans start, the riders in first. You can hear that bike idling in the pits. Its Moto 3 bike needs a roller start, so they started from the pits. And Kev, who should be in third, had to withdraw from the event because he couldn't get a teammate. So here we are. You can see I am not built for athleticism, having to run across to the bike. So I actually had a pretty good start once I got onto the bike. I'm not made for that sprinting across the track. Launch was pretty good, pretty happy with that. Again, Blocky Epis got a really good start. We saw that from Saturday's racing. And then that's Hayden Nelson there as well. He's got a pretty good start. Both of them are in the 400 class, but very darn quick. And now I knew, having tested setup on Saturday in the second race, that I had to be careful on the cold tyres and the cooler tyres. It was actually a lot windier on the grid than anticipated, and you could see there, rolling through turn 2, I was just pushing a little bit too hard and actually missed back shifting and ran in a little bit hot into turn 2. It was a beautiful day. The weather was pretty good, pretty warm, but the wind was pretty blustery at times. It's coming straight from the ocean, so it gets a bit cool. And once we were out in front, I knew that Min on the NSF 250, a nicely tricked out NSF 250, would only probably take a couple of laps to catch us. In the second race on Saturday, I was running full fuel and was capable of 46s, 47s, while they were still doing 44s. And throughout most of his stints, Min was doing 44s and 45s as well. So he kind of didn't drop pace, whereas I had to, just carrying the extra fuel up high and then trying to reserve my physical fitness as well. Meant that I was just pulling back on the pace. We did put a brand new set of tyres into the bike in the morning. So I went out, we changed the settings in the fork and the front tyre back to what we were used to for the from the first race on the Saturday. And I tested that in the morning, warm up, as well as scrubbing the tyres in. Felt pretty good. So we're back towards that 46, 47 for the first kind of bit of the stint with the fresh tyres once the fuel load started to come down. You see here, Min's caught us, I think that was 3 or 4 laps into the race. And I start to try to follow Min. Now, realistically, probably not the best idea to try to follow him, knowing you'll have probably a couple of seconds on us. So try to stick to the back of him as long as possible, not make too many mistakes. Again, this is a 2-hour endurance race with the rider swap. Anything can happen. So with the endurance racing, it's just as much a race against yourself and making sure you stay upright as it is about finishing the race in first place in the shortest time possible. Because as the age-old saying, to finish first you got to finish. So we knew that the bike with Min on, he was an absolute gun. That young rider that he's just absolutely flying around on the bike in Asia Talent Cup, getting top 10s in Asia Talent Cup. To be able to do that, you've got to be some level of talent. So I knew not to try to too hard. I do make a few mistakes behind him. One of the biggest mistakes I started to make throughout the endurance, the race itself, compared to the sprint races, is miss shifts. Now, I don't know whether that's down to me fatiguing. It will kind of probably be a mix of a few things. Me fatiguing, still getting used to GP shift, and, much older rear sets that have a bit of play in them. So I have to look at that. There's a nice photo from Pappy of me on the straight behind Min. This is a few more laps through as we're coming up onto the back of either H or her friend. They ended up having to share a bike for the full endurance race purely because they had bike issues. There's a nice shot there coming down the straight, the pit board that Andrew was holding out for us, keeping me in good understanding of where I was on the track. Unfortunately, I was a bit annoyed seeing that the gap to the riders in front was increasing so quick. I had anticipated Min would be able to push a gap, but not quite as quickly as he was. Here you have one of those mistakes. You can hear I just didn't click the second gear. Again, something that we'll have to look at once we're getting ready for the night racing later in the year. Yeah, you see me making a few mistakes throughout this. I think it was on track for over an hour between the two stints. And yeah, I make a few mistakes under brakes, especially with the back shifting, and that was, again, first time using GP shift this weekend. It's just something I was learning, especially when you're getting tired, you start to make mistakes. And I did that a couple of times. I went for going the wrong way through the box, falling back on street pattern, which I've been doing since I started riding in 2008. So it definitely did take a little bit of a mental edge off, trying to remember that. Oof, there's a nice pass there through the hay shed. One of the quickest parts of the track. Seemed to make pretty good time on most people through here, no matter the bike. Like even yesterday against Kev, you could see we were pretty good around hay shed and then up over Lukey down into MG. The long, low, stable nature and heavy nature of the SV650 kind of means it works well in the faster stuff. Coming up past 3 names on the Kawasaki there. My top speeds are actually pretty good, even by myself, running a fairly solitary race as endurance racing tends to do. And you can see here the difference in speed between Kawasaki 400 and the SV. Now at Eastern Creek or City Motorsport Park when we race, that isn't such a pronounced top speed difference. We still get around about the same top speed, but it's made differently. Here at Phillip Island, I'm nearly clicking 5th gear on the SV coming off the last corner. At Eastern Creek, I'm coming off the last corner in 3rd. So the smaller bikes are already, as you can see again here, the smaller bikes are already nearly at their peak speed as I'm still stretching through 6th gear in the box, which with the SV is a bit of an overdrive gear, so it does carry a bit more down the straight. And you can see into turn 1, got a bit more up my sleeve as well. That was actually Craig White, our tyre sponsor. He supports us with Bridgestones. Should hit up White's Racing Products if you need some tyres fitted to your bike. Road bike tyres or race bike tyres. Again, you can see either H or her teammate there again. They lose a lot of time in the pits because they would have to pull in, refuel the bike. There's no quick fuel type jugs used in our racing here. You can see there, P2 on the board, plus 99, minus 57. So it was greater gap than 99 seconds to the riders behind, but there was still nearly a minute in front. And this was leading up towards our pit stop. A couple of beautiful photos here of Carl Kitson, our teammate, getting ready for the changeover, the handover. He did just over 40 minutes on the bike in his stint on his SV650. Did really well. He was usually generally 1 to 2 seconds a lap slower than my times, which actually still allowed us to increase our gap over the riders behind us. Min came into the pits and did a bike swap with his teammate Ben, who went out on his RS 250. I think Ben got a 7 or 8 or so laps in before he started to have issues with the bike and had to limp the bike back. So he managed to get back into the pits and Min jumped back onto the bike. This is a cool little side-by-side of our pit stop. Me jumping on, just there moving across the armband. That's how you know which rider's supposed to be on track. Now, I don't have a pit lane limiter nor a speedometer, so I was taking it very easy, making sure I didn't get done for speeding in pit lane. Once you cross that line, you see the speed sign with the cross through it. You can absolutely hammer it, which is quite scary because the pit lane entry and exit here at Phillip Island are pretty narrow and slightly bumpy. But I'm already up to, I think it's 4th gear here, so you've got a fair hook going. just as I come out of the pits, there's Min on the Moto3 bike. So his teammates already had the issue. He's already gone back out and he's just unlapped himself. So we are now on the same lap. His lap times being a lot faster than mine do mean that he will slowly catch the back of us as we go past Craig White there. Yeah, Min's lap times are good, that he gets away. He does slowly manage to catch the back of us towards the end of the race. But I know here I need to take it easy and not try to latch onto the back of Min because full tank, it's still the same front tyre that we started with. We did end up having to swap out the rear to yesterday's tyre, which we flipped on the rim, purely because there was a bit of chewing on the tyre from pushing probably a bit too hard. And maybe it was a lot warmer today than it had been on Saturday, so maybe something to do with that. So just had to be careful. You can see there, I'm already starting to push. It's the first lap. I made probably a little bit of a rude move on that rider, so I apologise to that rider. And again, I'm trying to keep Min in sight when I realistically just need to do what I got to do. But I was, if I'm being perfectly honest, I was a bit annoyed with myself that I was dropping so much time. As you can see here, towards the end of that lap, Min's already got his eye in. I've just pushed a little too hard. Again, we've gone from where I had been with a low fuel load back up to a full tank. And this one was proper scary. That was the front fully folding. You can actually hear my knee in the deck catching the bike. Like you hear riders saying all the time, "Oh, I caught the bike on my knee." You know, that was me 100% catching the bike on the knee. The camera does not do it justice because we have the GoPro auto stabilization, but you can actually see the bike fold in and you can hear my knee slider on the ground there. And that was definitely a sign to me. I ran wide at turn 1, then ran wide there coming into the bottom of MG, and I went, you know what, Min can keep it. I didn't want to end it there. That was nearly a massive weekend thrown away for negligible losses. So thankfully we saved it. Thankfully the Bridgestone tyre came back to me along with the suspension from Wellsprung, and the knee slider bit nicely into the ground to keep me up. Wasn't quite Marc Marquez spec from the last couple of Grand Prix there where he ended up on the inside, but you know what, that's as close as I want to get to that. So now I just again need to settle into a rhythm, make sure I don't do any damage to the bike, make sure I don't have a big moment, hurt myself, or get caught out by changing weather conditions. One thing about Phillip Island, when the wind does change, it is hard to tell, and it'll catch you out quite aggressively depending on whereabouts on track you are. Just kind of running my own laps, making sure I don't get caught up with back markers. And everyone's running their own race. There's no slow riders at an event like this. Everyone's pushing still pretty hard. I was starting to see on the pit board that the gap behind me was decreasing, so that meant that Min had actually passed the group of riders that had previously been in second place, as you see me come up past this bunch of KTMs here. Yeah, so I knew the gap was closing, so then I had to start making the decision, start thinking about the calculation of, oh, well, if they're getting closer to a minute behind me, then what happens if there's a safety car, if there's a big incident on track, if I start to have mechanical issues or start to get physically tired, whatnot. So yeah, I have a few things running through my head, and that's all part of endurance racing as well. You know, it's not just the short game, it's the tactics. You know, even here coming up behind Loic, you know, in a sprint race, I'd go for that gap, but you want to make sure that you don't come together with someone and cause any issues for yourself or someone else. Loic riding the second of the two Kramers there. I don't think we've actually seen Mick on his Kramer yet. But that's Loic on the second bike there. Again, looking at the board, making sure that I can see what's going on, and I notice that the number's still coming down. So Min's catching from behind, which is always a worry. You know, starting to hear things going wrong with the bike, starting to think about the potential for issues on track. My big concern at this point now, with over an hour and a half done, if not more, I think riders are starting to get messy. Riders are starting to go off on different lines than they probably normally would, and having crashes, which is what we can see here. Unfortunately, our friend Cam Dunker had a big crash there at turn 12, the exit of turn 12. It's a very, very fast crash. We'd actually spoken to Cam and his dad on the Saturday night. We were at Pino's, the restaurant there in Cows and PI. And it was good to catch up with them, and had a really lovely conversation with Cam and his dad. So it was a real shame. I was actually really bummed to see that was Cam down in the gravel. And then the kind of worry came upon me of, that could be a really difficult place to clear up an incident. And if Cam was injured and down, then there could be a safety car. Now you can see this flashing yellow light in conjunction with the wave yellow flag. Now you've got a flashing red and yellow light along with the waved yellow, and that means safety car. And I'm doing math like crazy now. Believe you me, I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, I'll tell you that. I'm sitting there, I'm freaking out going, I'm not sure what's going to happen if the safety car comes out. If I'm behind the safety car, Min can then kind of catch up to the back of the group, or vice versa. I was sitting there freaking out. You hear me missing a shift there because I'm trying to do the math in my head, and I just started to panic a little bit. You also take a bit of time off throttle because you want to make sure that everything's good to go, that a car's not going to pop out back in front of you, and then you can start to see the green lights. It's changed from your full yellows to full greens, although I had seen a couple of yellows out still. When I didn't know what was going on, came to this part, there's a stationary yellow, and I'm thinking, that's probably the incident with Cam. But if what happened while I was there flashing greens, what does that mean? No safety car. You can actually see, if you look hard enough, Cam's walking down the wall as some marshals go out to tend to the bike. And then, green light, good to go. The race is back on. So in the end, I didn't have to worry about, the final 10-minute sprint trying to fend off Min, because if that were the case, Min definitely would have crossed the line first. I think he had a good few seconds up his sleeve over me by the end of the race. And this is 2 hours in a row. I have chopped up one of our sponsors. Again, passing Craig White there down into turn 4 actually surprised me with how late he got into the brakes there. So fair dues to you, Craig, and apologies for the tight manoeuvre. He did come and hit me in the ribs later that afternoon. For me to say sorry to him, if you know what I mean. Again, coming up on the back of either H or I think the other girl's name was Nicole. I'm very sorry if I've got that wrong. And it's really awesome to see those two girls are getting so fast across the weekend. Fortunately, they had the engine expire in H's bike. The time's starting to wind down. They actually started putting out boards saying 10 minutes left or 8 minutes left, which was a bit of a countdown, as there's a bit of a fast pass there on Alex on his KTM 390. I can see this group in front, which actually had Ben Baker, Glenn Allerton, and I can't remember who the third one was. They were absolutely flying. Nelson, I think it might have been. They were absolutely flying there coming into the last lap. And now I've got a conundrum. I know they are behind me on track, in air quotes. They're far down behind me on time. But Min is still catching me, and do I back off? Do I make a pass? And then if I try to make a pass and I actually start to push a little bit, because I could see them coming in the last couple of laps, I thought, I don't want to get tangled with them, maybe have an issue if they're starting to have a bit of a last lap battle, because I know they did at City Motorsport Park, so I kind of didn't want to get involved in any potential mess that could arise from them. It was actually really interesting seeing some of their lines, little bike lines, they're cutting over ripple strips left, right and centre. The more experienced racers that they are. And I was getting pretty tired at this point, I won't lie. There's only so much that bananas, Red Bull and sports mix can keep you fully awake when you're not quite as fit as you should be on a motorbike. So coming down into Lukey Heights and down into MG, the last lap of the race, is me panicking a little bit, thinking, oh, don't have a moment there again. You can see the scratch marks have increased. And MG throughout the race, people were starting to have issues. Thankfully we didn't. And then coming onto the straight here, not the best run, but again, I didn't want to try to catch too close to these chaps because there may be issues with the flagging, which you can see there. And that was awesome. I knew I was in the lead still. I was stoked, fist bumping and going nuts like a fool. It was awesome to see pit crew hanging over the pit wall, yelling out at us and waving me through. Finally gotten our first endurance race win. I actually nearly passed that rider in front, which is not very courteous when it comes to the end of a race. So I pulled back, let that gap build out before coming into the pits here. And as is something that I always tend to do, I am currently thanking the marshal coming in. I try to give thumbs up to all the marshals, all these marshals, all the folk wearing orange around the track, all the St. George staff. They are all volunteers. They come down and do this for the love. So massive, massive thanks to all of them. And I try to thank them every time after a race.
Right, here we are. The weekend is more or less finished. The 2 hour has been run and won, and thankfully for us, we're the ones that won it. We had a really good couple of stints. I went out, I did the first stint, about 50 minutes on track. Carl Kitson, our teammate, finally back after some injury. He went out and pumped out a really good 40-odd minute session. Managed to keep the gap that we had built, and then I crossed the line for whatever the time that was remaining, and we were 63 odd seconds in front of second place. So over a minute we had up our sleeve, should I say. Yeah, absolutely stoked. It's been a long time coming, winning one of these endurance rounds, and to have it here at this wonderful Phillip Island racetrack is something else. This track is definitely, you can see why it is the premier track for motorcycle racing in the country. And here in Australia, it's just phenomenal, especially when you get weather like we've had. Absolutely amazing to race around here. Competition has been pretty fierce. The kids on the Moto 3 bikes are absolutely flying. But over consistency across the 3 stints through the race, we were able to take it home. So absolutely over the moon with that. We go home with maybe a few bike issues. The SV I had to turn off halfway back to Parc Fermé because it started making some really loud clanking noises. So we'll see what happened with that. When we get back to Sydney, back home, we'll pull it apart. But, you know, luck was on our side for once with this endurance racing. I absolutely love endurance racing purely because, like, anything can happen. Strategy, Andrew, who's behind the camera, is a great strategist, along with Carl, Dad, Jess, Joanne, Mum, everyone that was on the team. Everyone came together and it was just absolutely mega. Stoked with the result. And yeah, all I can say is finally we've got that number 1 in the endurance. And to take it here at Phillip Island, what more could we ask for? Thanks for watching.
There goes my clutch.